the Democratic Party, who died on Friday at the age of 90. Just a preamble before I introduced my guests this morning. Paul Kawanga Ssemogerere will be laid to rest later today in Wakiso district, that is in Nkumba to be very specific. The former DP president died on Friday morning at his home in Rubaga division of Kampala. He was 90 years of age. His interment today will draw the curtains on an illustrious political career spanning more than 60 years, in which he witnessed political machinations of the Uganda People's Congress and the Kabaka Yeka coalition or alliance, the excesses of the Amin regime, the Moshi meetings that led to the 1980 elections, relinquishing the right of protesting what was described as a rigged election by the Uganda People's Congress to Museveni and his UPM, to serving under the new NRA dispensation of a broad-based government whose first act was to ban political parties in contesting and later contesting for the 1996 presidential elections. In the words of some nonchalant political commentators, Ssemogerere came, he saw, but unfortunately did not conquer. He allowed himself to work too often in settings where he had no power or real influence. But at the time of his death, according to former DP stalwart and now FDC Honcho, Elias Lukwago, the elderly statesman, was working to unite a deeply divided opposition. Morning. We are joined by Emmanuel Dombo, the Communications Director at the National Resistance Movement Secretariat, as well as Mr. Joseph Sewungu, the MP for Kalungu West. I got that almost wrong, but no doubt very welcome, gentlemen, to the program. A very good morning, first of all.
Thank you. Good morning, our viewers, and good morning, those in the studio.
Good morning, Honorable.
Good morning, moderator.
Yes, Joseph Sewungu. I needed to pronounce that name right.
Sewungu Joseph Gonzaga. And it is commutative. You can say Joseph Gonzaga Sewungu or Sewungu Joseph Gonzaga. That's my price.
Why should it matter that way?
I've said it is commutative. You can say whatever. You can say Joseph Gonzaga, Sewungu, or Sewungu Joseph Gonzaga. But my happiness is hearing the three of them. You think everybody studied mathematics? I don't know.
Happiness is hearing the three of them. Paul Kawanga Ssemogerere would also perhaps be a man who would love to hear his names pronounced out fully, especially as the eulogies continue to come in, and he's due to be laid to rest later today. I would like to ask each of you to first give me your what came into your mind when the news of the death of a veteran politician of his stature came through first. Honorable Dombo.
When I saw on the social media, first of all, I want to join the people of Uganda to condole with the family on this demise, because we're in a mourning mood, and we thank government that has accepted to give Dr. Paul Kawanga Ssemogerere an official burial. When I saw on social media that Dr. Paul Kawanga Ssemogerere had died, I had about 2 weeks ago seen a tweet by Honorable Robert Kyagulanyi when he visited him in his home, and he took a picture and he tweeted. I even responded and say he was advising my young brother to say he should be visiting quite often such people, because so that they could partake from the cup of wisdom that such people had. And I didn't know that the next time I would hear about him, about 1.5 weeks later, is that he had died. Perhaps those who were close to the family knew about the sickness that he has been going through.
That's right.
Because yesterday when I had the eulogy in the church, it seems he has been frail and unwell for some time. But Paul Kawanga Ssemogerere is somebody who is admirable. And I'm at pain. Because amongst these young upcoming politicians, you can rarely see a person of his character. He had an impeccable character. I never heard him or read about him abusing anybody in Uganda. Even when he referred to those he disagreed with, he did so with courtesy and decorum. And even during Obote's time, when he was a member of parliament and leader of the opposition, I was a young man picking interest in politics, because I was in secondary school through up to senior 6 when I was, and I enjoyed whenever I had an opportunity to listen to his debates, and he talked with respect. Many people who may not know my political history, I've told people before that DP is the party I joined first at will. And
at will.
At will.
Interesting.
Because I was a young boy, and I didn't have any political inclinations of the past. In 1980, when they decided to go multi-party, and all my brothers who were at the university were UPC. So when we reached home, I said, but why can't I be DP anyway? I had listened to him on radio the previous night, and I thought he talked sense. And I decided to, in my village, everybody was wondering why in Miss Almara's family, this young man who is professing DP. So when President Ssemogerere came to Mbale for the presidential campaigns, Balaki Kiria made arrangements for us. He was the chairman of People's Transport, I think, and he sent us buses. We went singing DP Egumire, and we went, and he came in and with vibe, and he talked. The only disappointing thing which I had is that the message I expected to listen to hear
at that time
is not the message that I had, because as a young man who had lived during Amin's time, I expected somebody to come and address the pain that we had gone through of Amin's time. When he came, he was so diplomatic, and one of the things he introduced, he said he introduced his wife and said she was the first woman in Africa to get a PhD in economics.
All right.
Now, when I joined those things, I started wondering, how are they related to the current political struggles that we are going through? My brothers challenged me and wondered. I said, wait for when Obote comes so that we take you and you go and listen. But whatever happened was history, because President Ssemogerere, President Emeritus of the Democratic Party, he has lived a fruitful life. He has been a very strong Christian, and this is demonstrated through his words, his deeds, and the way he conducted politics. Let me hope the young generation will pick a few lessons.
No doubt about interesting perspective there that will form the crust of our discussion a little bit later, especially on the man's legacy. Honorable Joseph Sewungu, you are a DP stalwart. I use the word stalwart because over the years we have followed your speeches and your engagements on the political scene, and you seem, at least on the outside, to be still stuck with the Democratic Party. In the politics of this country, what is on the face value is sometimes different from what is behind the scenes. But that is a discussion for another day. What's your take on the man's...
First of all, I want to correct this wrong impression.
Yes.
Honorable Dombo is giving. You heard what he started with. I want to thank government for accepting to give him an official burial. Should it be accepting, or there must be a principle and the legislation that is put in place? This business of thinking that official burial, and I don't think Ssemogerere's family they will come because they have accepted. No. Let us remove that kind of reasoning.
All right, that is a debate, of course, that will come through.
Because you see, I'm going to talk about him, but I must make some corrections. You have heard what Honorable Demba said. He's a good, he's beginning to tell lies, Catholic as he is. Those people, he says, Balaki Kiria, who was in charge of Uganda People's Transport, the company that was brought by Obote, allowed them to transport people to go and attend the function of Ssemogerere in Mbale. Then he says that at that time, he had what he said, he only introduced his wife. That is incorrect. Because the issues at hand by that time were above introducing someone's wife. And Ssemogerere has not been that category of person. But if you ask him, when did he leave DP? The moment he attended that function, did he cross from DP? Majority of us, like me, was born in DP. My father was a Democrat. He worked with the Ssemogerere. He campaigned for him, and even in Parliament. Actually, for me, I met Ssemogerere my first time from my father's home. Then my greatest moment is when we were at St. Savio Junior School, when I was in P5, 1981, after they had stolen his vote. Obote, of course, Obote stole the vote. And indeed, one of the major areas I give respect to Ssemogerere is that he never adopted the system of using a gun to take power. Because even those who use the guns, what have they done up to now? And how will they get power? For him, he was saying, we must use the political path to take this government to a better transition. Now you see where we are stuck ever since then. So Ssemogerere met us when we were younger children. By that time, we had a Mirafiori vehicle, a state vehicle. And he used to have only one policeman accompanying him in the catch uniform. So he talked to us at primary with Brother Kisitu, he introduced to us, and indeed we were with him. However, I can never forget that Ssemogerere worked for the transition of this country after the liberation of Uganda. And indeed, if people don't know history, DP had some team that went to the bush. But Ssemogerere refused. He said, no, we shall not take the name of the Democratic Party to the bush. But if you got time, invite Sam Kutesa here. He will tell you how they went to the bush, because the Kaira is not around those team. They said, those of you who feel that you should go to the bush, you go and fight. And that's the team that was led by Kaira and those others who were defiant against the election. So they went and fought until they met Museveni and they came and took up government. So in the transition, what they argued upon for the 4 years failed. And he left up government. He said, no, I cannot continue. He left government. And there is nobody who was so annoyed and who was angry against Ssemogerere other than General Museveni. He was so bitter that how could this man leave my government without informing me that I want to give you a ministry, but just dropping the government. And that kept Ssemogerere very strong up to the end, because he never waited for him to be thrown out of cabinet the way he has done the Bidandis, the Honorable Matembes and all those people. He threw out just and left them there that were NRM. So that's the Ssemogerere I know. Yeah. And he has been a Democrat, a Christian, since 1994. I've been moving with the Ssemogerere in the Public of the Cross in Kampala, from Lubaga up to Nakivubo, Audi Kampala, and all those places. Even last Sunday, before he died, the other Sunday, he was in church. So generally, that's the man we had. But I'm so saddened when you hear the NRMs, they are coming out to praise him so much, and here we are with Emmanuel Dombo, the honorable member commissioner, who was in charge, who was our boss in parliament, when we were asking for that law, legislation from government, that creates the council of elders, and those people who deserve official burial, not to be determined by one single person, General Museveni. And indeed, that one, I don't agree with, but Kawanga Ssemogerere, and he was a professional teacher. He's among those few teachers in the world who qualified from school and became an headmaster immediately. Interesting there. Immediately. Of course, you do speak of what is no doubt a pacifist stance that was taken by Paul Kanga Ssemogerere, especially after what was deemed to be a rigged election by the Uganda People's Congress in 1980. I just want to read a quote in an interview with the Daily Monitor in 2004. He was asked the question, and this was his answer. Yes, we took up our seats in Parliament, and I have been vindicated. First of all, it was a hard decision to take, but it was taken democratically. In my conscience, I had to mull that question. Should we boycott Parliament? Should we join? If we boycott, what do we do? There were very strong voices for boycotting Parliament and very strong voices for going to the bush. We thought that we had a special role to promote reconciliation and national unity at a very difficult period in our country's history. Now, this is a very strong message. The fact that Uganda right now finds itself in another difficult period in its own trajectory. Men with such stance ought to come forth. Do you think it is about time that the politicians of the day consider thinking critically about where we are?
The politics of the times determines on how the politicians at that time behave. And every time, once it becomes history, it will be talked about. Sure. Right now, we have a President General of the Democratic Party who chose to collaborate with government. It was a hard decision that he took. He will only be discussed when Mao is no longer living in order to appreciate the value of the decision that he took. When President General of the DP chose to go to Parliament, there are people who criticize him, who would have loved him to join the bush. But the critical decision that he took at the moment defines the legacy that he has left. Even when he decided to join the national resistance movement, there are people who didn't want him to do so. But for him, given what he was and what he visioned for this country, Paul Kawanga Ssemogerere accepted to do that. And it's only him who can explain what mattered. Even when the young people were haranguing him out of the office. By the way, when people talk about Paul Kawanga Ssemogerere, it's as if everybody was very happy with what he was doing. There were DP mobilizers and activists who wanted to throw him out of the office. And they formed groups and factions. But him being the statesman he was, he chose at the time of his choosing, he left office, and now he's no more. The best we can do is to talk well about his tribute. But hearing from what my brother is saying, you can see that Paul Ssemogerere left without completing the job. Because the things he's saying here, Paul Kawanga Ssemogerere would never say them.
Like what?
Would never say them. First of all, the decorum, the reference with which he referred to the people he competed with, and the choices he made to join the governments, which many people would have criticized.
Yes.
And secondly, I want to tell you that you are a member of parliament. I'm no longer a member of parliament. And you have the privilege and the forum either to create a private member's bill or to lobby government so that the things that you want happen so that they can become law. In the absence that law is not there, and the decision was taken by government that this happens and the family accepted, me, I want to thank government and I want to thank the family because they have shown the maturity that if Paul Ssemogerere himself was alive, if he came back and had to go back, this is the way the family has behaved is the way Honorable Paul Ssemogerere would have loved to behave.
Allow us ask Honorable Joseph Sewongo to give us his perspective as a Democratic Party stalwart. Paul Kawanga Ssemogerere, according to Emmanuel Dombo, joined the government. What the records say, he was a member of a broad-based government, and technically at that point, some say he actually never joined the government but agreed to work with the government, something that Norbert Mao is also trying to allude to. There are those that accuse him of working for the national resistance movement after joining, but he claims he's simply working with it to drive an agenda. Do you think Paul Kawanga Ssemogerere right now is, of course, I don't know, but dismayed at what Norbert Mao perhaps has done, but we didn't get a chance to hear from him on that particular aspect?
Yeah, I think, first of all, I was giving history of what happened between him and I in the parliament, okay? And definitely we shall push, but we are...
Yeah, that can always be pushed. Yeah.
But you've heard the first statement, he said, Mao took a decision, not DP, to join the government. You heard it from his own mouth. Okay. And that's a very good statement from a spokesperson of NRM. So he knows that it is Mao, not Democratic Party.
Democratic Party.
You get me? Secondly, you see, when the fact is, in 1986, these people came together to build the consensus. The type of politics that was there in 1986 is not what we have now. Ssemogerere and the other teams came in for a transitional government. Indeed, there were arguments that were made at that time. You talk about, you've given us some brief facts about what happened when Ssemogerere entered parliament, why he agreed to go to parliament in 1980. Indeed, if you follow what he did from 1981 up to when the government was overthrown, you are a journalist. Go and look for those papers, Munansi. He created a newspaper to write about the atrocities of Obote during his regime. And later on, that paper was transformed into an English paper known as The Citizen, which was headed by chief editor, the Honorable Kakoza John Baptist, whom I succeeded to contest in Kalungu. Now, all those papers we are writing about, and they were both accepted. Do you expect these days, NTV running a story against the government that you have covered physically? This TV will be closed. That was the type of government and type of system that was there by then.
No, we shall cover, as long as we put the facts right.
Let me tell you, once facts are right, there are things you not run here live on TV.
No. I would like to be very specific about the policy of NTV. As long as the facts are set, we shall broadcast the story.
Let us leave that there.
All right, let's leave that
there's no independence on you as we run government.
That's an accusation and an allegation.
It's not an accusation. I am telling you. But I will tell you, we come from villages, you have done all these things.
All right.
So, but what are we saying? Which paper now can Munasi be published as we talk now? How many months did the paper remain closed? All of the monitor is your paper. Wasn't it closed for running a factual story? And have they ever been ruled against you? Sedition. There's a case against that. So let us not tell lies when you are speaking here. Those are facts you cannot run away from. Monitor was closed one time. Ready paper would never come back to its glory because of writing stories that were run and facts were there because of the system. That's what Ssemogerere did in the 80s. By running that paper, he was given room to run. And Obote said it. No, let him write these stories, we shall see. But let us see if we actually, if you go to Kenya now, Ruto was asked, are you going to work with the Chinyata and the Raila Odinga? I said, no, I will not work with them. Let them work as the opposition to check government. And those are facts. That's why you see countries like Ghana, they have changed the leadership from opposition to government. Those in government go into opposition and run the country.
Okay.
So, generally speaking, Ssemogerere is saying that Ssemogerere is not talking like Ssemogerere. But the weaknesses he was giving were they handled. You saw, he wrote, we had the blacker book for those who are causing atrocity and all that. We also wrote, as read the paper, if you were a serious government, you have a country, you have led it for over 30 years, then there is a party, a younger party, National Unity Platform, says you have killed these people. You have placed our people into incarceration within no sufficient cause and they are political detainees. Why don't you come out to set out these problems as a leader of government? And how do you heal wounds? Because the most important issue in this country, shall we ever have a transition that is peaceful without the use of the gun? Without the use of the gun. Those were the ideologies of Ssemogerere. He could not delve in leaving a serving soldier, a son of the president, to continue doing politics, but he's a serving soldier, yet the UPDF Act is very clear and the Constitution. Those are the ideologies. So his legacy, as he dies, what do you reflect from his death? You have, as the president, come out directly to give any condolence message directly about this man who worked with him.
The president,
if you ask General Museveni, no, I had the Honorable Nabanja, the Prime Minister, yesterday representing the president, which was okay. I have no quarrel with that.
The president has a tradition of speaking sometimes days after
burial
of
after
an eminent person.
Okay, but that's his own. We cannot push him to do what I can't push him to do what he wants. But remember, working with the Ssemogerere, if you look at Ssemogerere, he's among those few people who managed to take the president by that time into the Western world, show him all those countries where Ssemogerere was working with Germany and those states. And all that was giving support to this country, to build an image of the country. And
you seem to give Honorable Ssemogerere a look that seems to suggest you do not entirely agree with what he's saying.
First of all, why I'm looking at my brother that way, I don't know which party he is in.
I'm on the National Unity Platform.
So, how can he talk for DP? Can you kindly bring a person from DP?
From the Democratic Party.
To speak for DP.
Actually, he knows.
Because this man,
I was the chief whip of DP,
this man
deputy whip of DP when he was in the parliament. He has just said, yeah, he was in DP, but he's in NRA.
All right, let him respond.
This man has left DP. He cannot speak for DP because he's not a member of DP. DP has legitimate members and legitimate office bearers who can come here and speak for DP. The decision,
who determines invitations here?
The decision which Mao took, you know, he doesn't know that, I don't know how they work in the National Unity Platform, but layers of leadership have layers of responsibilities and decisions that they do. At national level, the president can order a war. Then he comes and informs Parliament. The Minister for Finance can spend within a certain limit. then it comes to seek justification of parliament. So organizations at various levels, I don't know what the DP constitution says, but I know the president of Uganda can give an executive order to do certain things because that's within the mandate. So organizations are run according to their constitutions and according to what the corporate structures determine. But for Paul Kawanga Ssemogerere, one of the things he didn't do is to publish that black book, because I would have been interested to read the contents of the black book, but it seemed it was a tool that he used in order to put pressure to the then government in order to address the atrocities that existed at that time. Right now, we have challenges that we overcome every day as we go through. Because running government, Honorable, my colleague here may say that there is no democracy, but me, I know he has repeatedly. Isn't this your fourth term?
No, no, no.
Third?
That is my third term.
Yes. He has, for 3 consecutive terms, he has been elected, competing and winning. And that's the democracy that we're talking about. Until yesterday, he was never a member of the leading opposition in parliament. But a young party came up, it swept the votes, and there was a transition in parliament as far as the leadership of the opposition is concerned. Even at the top level, the transition will come at its own choosing. But I want to tell you, we can only that can only happen through a democratic process, like they, through a democratic process, became the leading party in the opposition. I think if they work hard, they can also become the leading party in government. All
right. Allow me make a clarification on the basis of invitation in light of the death of Paul Kawanga Ssemogerere. It was not on a political party inclination. So we are not speaking as the National Resistance Movement or the Democratic Party or the National Unity Platform, but as eminent persons whose readings of Uganda's political history are worth sharing in light of the man's legacy. That is entirely why you are here with us.
And I want to thank you. You see, you invited the former members of DP. He was a DP, I was a DP.
Because you have a rich perspective you know, to share with us.
Don't think Honorable Dombo is stupid. Not so that DP joined the ANRM, but Mao joined the ANRM government. He knows why he's saying it. And it's fundamental. He's not stupid. I know him very well. I know him. If he wants to become a sycophant, he can become. But at this particular time, he knows why he's saying that DP joined the ANRM. But he says Mao joined the DP. He knows. So the people invited us, both of us here. We are very right to be brought here. Former DP, Ssemogerere DP.
And it's exactly why you should enlighten us on how best can a legacy of a man who chose to work with government can be something of a blueprint for other politicians, where you see that the criticism that Mao has received, especially from those within the Democratic Party itself, perhaps is not warranted.
You see, I don't want to... indeed, if you follow your stories you have been running, I'm among those few members of who left the DP, who have been trying to give any debate how Mao left and why he left. Because remember, he was his chief whip in parliament. And I totally avoid to discuss Mao's issues crossing. You remember, we had a lot of meetings, we had a lot of reunions, where even, you see, Ssemogerere, if we, Honorable Dombu can tell you the truth. You see, why I insist,
don't direct
of course he was a DP. Why I insist we go to the same church. Ssemogerere inviting him for any particular meeting, all a press. You said that NTV is going to get a story from Ssemogerere was not something very easy. You could take a lot of care and interest in finding out why you want to take him. But when we had the DP reunion, remember that time you covered us everywhere. Ssemogerere attended a number of them. And there is one statement I can never forget about Ssemogerere. He said when we were in Jinja, when he was given a microphone, His Excellency, the President of the National Unity Platform, Kyagulanyi, was one of the guests and was not in DP. Though he's also DP by birth and the support of his father. But Ssemogerere said, I want to thank this young man, Kyagulanyi Sentamu. Ever since I saw you beginning your politics, the time you have begun your work, I've not seen any mistake you have made since you began. And I saw your father, because Ssemogerere worked with Kyagulanyi's father. That statement was so fundamental. And as he began, you talked about the tweets. Kyagulanyi tweeted the picture, photograph with the president. This man, can you imagine? I missed, but Kyagulanyi has had a chance of seeing Ssemogerere before he died, and he must have taken him to his library. Because in Ssemogerere's home, for us we call him Senkagale. That's the best name. If you got a chance of going to his house and takes you up in his library, that's a political blessing. So that's the Ssemogerere we had. Because we tried to build the union, even by then my president, Norbert Mao, was my president. We moved out to the country to see how we could unite DP and take up government.
Allow me to ask a question on the political times and the kind of stance that politicians should take. There are some nonchalant political actors who claim that perhaps the likes of Paul Kawanga Ssemogerere were politicians not fitted for the Uganda political space. They were never militant, they were never aggressive enough for the population, so much so that those that took a more aggressive stance overtook them in terms of political space, something that we saw. Do you think that right now aggressiveness in politics, being hardline and wanting to take it all, is something that politicians should desist from and seek to have a common ground where each can come on board and be able to bring anything they have to in terms of contribution?
Right now, when you look at the times when Dr. Paul Kawanga Ssemogerere lived and had the opportunity to practice politics, you see that if everybody is militant, then you don't know what could have happened in the house where he was the leader of the opposition. He was able to sail through and bring the opposition agenda in civility. Paul Kawanga Ssemogerere, when you listen to what description was made about him in church, by the way, even his brother, Honorable Kawanga, John, is not any different. You see that his molding is purely because of family background and the church influence. Because these are two institutions which molded, and when I was reading about the history of the previous leaders, I read about Benedicto Kiwanuka and the role he played within the church. You can see that Benedicto Kiwanuka, he was a very active member of the Catholic Church, that even when he was Chief Justice, he would never miss any mass, and he would also serve as altar boy, even when he was an old man. That is the description that was made. If a person can do that up to that level, and Dr. Ssemogerere was a very firm student and close follower of the late Benedicto Kiwanuka. I mean, the last mass which he attended in church, it was at 5 a.m. Not many people of his age, not many people of his age would be that active. So you see that the religious influence really was a very huge factor. Many of the young politicians and aggressive politicians who do things that they do now, you cannot have traces of the church. Others, those who go there, they go there to politic, not basically to go and worship, and also learn the mannerism within the church. But coming to politics, you know, politics of the times is defined by the circumstances. There was an aggressive mood at the time that existed, and according to the President Museveni and team who went to the bush, they interpreted that given the circumstances that had happened during the elections, because you know that towards the declaration of results, the powers of the Electoral Commission were taken over and by the Military Commission. And it was only the Military Commission that had the powers to announce the results. Could be at that time they suspected that the only way to change the trajectory
of the country
in the country was to do what they did. Dr. Ssemogerere thought otherwise. Whether he was right or wrong, it is an issue that can be talked about, but it is only him who chose what he wanted to do, given the circumstances that existed. And right now we praise that because of his actions, could be many people were saved.
Okay. Honorable Sewungu, Dr. Paul Kawanga Ssemogerere was at the helm of the Democratic Party for 25 years. And it is thought that at the time where forces within the Democratic Party wanted elections to be conducted democratically to have a new leader, he was conveniently forward in saying we cannot conduct an election because within the current system, especially after 1996 elections, there were no political parties. So he asked the question, why are we conducting elections for a political party when the dispensation that we are under doesn't allow political parties? That, to some, was seen as an element of dictatorship. And when we are discussing his legacy, we should not miss that particular point. What's your take on it?
Remember, if you follow very well our cases in Uganda, Ssemogerere had a number of cases, and the lifting up, opening up of political parties was under Ssemogerere's case. You know, the Reina Kafire, Zakarolum, that case in the Supreme Court, which was not so easy. It is Ssemogerere who fought for that. But what I don't want to agree with is that Ssemogerere, when he was handing over power to Sebanakis, there was no, but because already had it. Actually, it is only DP that has transformed, changed power of its leadership from one president to another, or even if this actually. For them, they also have had a third president. And these ones, you know, we cannot ask them, for theirs is known, they will never be another president and chairman of their party. But the most important thing is that there was no anything dictatorship. But you see, remember, Ssemogerere built a younger force of Democrats, the UIDs and all of you, all those issues. And remember, if you look at those political, those African leaders who led their countries to independence, let us look at Nyerere. We look at Zambia, that is Kaunda. You go to Chinyata, but Chinyata, we shall pay much attention to Moi, and so many of them. If you look at the way they handed over their power, let us look at Nyerere himself, because most of the knowledge and the learning of Mr. Museveni is based on Nyerere's leadership and legacy. I had an opportunity under his leadership. When I say his leadership, he was our commissioner.
Of course, we do remember that.
When we were investigating the Basajabala saga of the taking of these markets that are now going back to the people, but the same person who gave them out is now giving them out another class. So when we met General Museveni, when under the committee of PAC, led by Kassiano Wadri, General Museveni told us that when they took over power, they never knew anything to do. But he asked Nyerere, by then, Mwalimu Nyerere, to give him people who would train them to run the government. So in 1986, Nyerere's team spent 2 years here training the new government how to run government. Now, Nyerere handed over power without any battles. Now, as we talk now, do you see anything in this country that there will be any transition of power without force? Now you have three family members fighting. The president wants presidents. He can tell you he's supporting between Karujire, the son MK, and Museveni. Let him tell us whom he's going to support.
No, that is not the issue for today. No, we won't be discussing.
But he's a politician.
We won't be discussing.
You can't discuss.
Allow us.
So what am I saying?
Yes.
There was nothing like dictatorship, because this man, even handing over power, he was around. And Sebana took over power with no battles, and he ended up giving out power. Okay. But remember, that was the time. And indeed, Ssemogerere, they made an elder. Okay. But the challenge in this country, we have failed to create what we call a council of elders.
A council of elders.
And the Desmond Tutu of South Africa, the Mandelas and others. The council of elders we have are presidential advisors who don't advise the president, who advises them.
Honorable Dombo, wrap this up for us, because we are fast approaching the half-hour mark at 8:30, and we need to be out of here as far as the Kickstarter discussion is concerned. Now, Paul Kanga Ssemogerere represents a league of politicians that is fast fading because of age and the fact that they cannot do a comeback. Do you think it is about time that a council of elders, one that is seen as formidable and works for all sides, is created to help advise on the critical trajectory the country should take?
There has been a debate in Parliament on a number of issues. Council of Elders has been one of the things that has been talked about. When you look at the quality of the upcoming young parliamentarians, other people have wondered whether there shouldn't be an upper house also in Parliament, so that it can have an opportunity to look again at either the laws that they make or to look at the spirit of the politics in the country. This can only be addressed through a constitutional reform, which our colleagues like Honorable Robert Mao has promised as the Minister for Justice, that if it comes, these are issues that could be considered for debate. But when you look at the average age of parliament, it is becoming lower and lower every year that passes. And that shows you that the transition which he's talking about, it started long time ago. When you look at the House, most of the senior members of parliament who are there are no longer there. They are fading off because the transition through democratic process is taking place.
Allowing for young
Even at the apex, whether you like it or not, the apex there will be a transition because either naturally or through somebody willingly leaving, that can be a transition. Because I talked about a transition of, in Tanzania. Tanzania has experienced a number of transitions. It has experienced a transition when President Mwalimu left through the term limit, but also when the president died. All these were transitions. So for us as a country, we have a democratic process and the law which describes how the transitions will be. When the constitutional reforms come up, they hit in the politics of the young people and the way they refer to one another and the way they treat one another. We shall definitely need a more senior and sober body that should stabilize the politics of this country. Whether it will be the Council of Elders, whether it will be an upper house, now it is for them in the House to decide and guide this country. All
right, thank you very much. Finally, you are heading straight to the barrio.
For me, I'm not among those who would support another parliament because already, you know what we have? We have more than 520. Okay. And the substance.
No, he's talking of an upper house.
An upper house, yes. We don't need it at the moment. Let us first clean the lower house we have.
The lower house that you have.
Then lastly, he was with us and he knows Honorable Mebaiga brought the presidential transitional bill. And indeed that bill was fought at its tabling by these people. The Right Honorable Speaker Kadaga said, why? Let us first send this bill to the relevant committee, then it can bounce back by rejecting it. But it's very rare and irregular to have a bill rejected at its inception on the floor of Parliament. And the transitional bill was, if in case the president is leaving power, how do we transit to the next president? We know General Museveni has a lot of issues on him, political, military, atrocities. But if we put in a presidential transition bill, the way they did to Moi in Kenya, Moi would have gone to prison. But Kenyans said, please, let us heal the wounds. This man has made these mistakes, but let us have a president coming in the system. But as we talk now, they don't accept putting up a presidential transition.
All right. Before we open a Pandora's box for another debate, you are heading to Nkumba for the barrio of Paul Kanga Ssemogerere. Just for the benefit of those that are watching and might want to be part of that particular, what is the place? Nkumba?
The place is called Nkumba, and I don't want to give the proper direction because I don't know that.
No, it's not your role.
But the moment you get to Nkumba, already the people of Katabi, that was from a constituency, they have put up a lot of, they have planted the banana trees, DP flags, and all that. But I am sure it is within Nkumba. Within Nkumba.
No
but
doubt.
I don't want to give the exact place.
The place is in Nkumba, Bufulu, to be very specific. That's where the remains of Paul Kanga Ssemogerere will be interred later today for eternal repose. It's been a pleasure having two gentlemen here. Honorable Joseph Sewungu, MP for Kalungu West, many thanks for the perspective, as well as Honorable Emmanuel Dombo, the communications
director. You have avoided the third, Joseph Gonzaga.
My apologies for that.
No
Emmanuel Dombo, the communications director at the National Resistance Movement. Many thanks. And that will do it for the Kickstarter discussion. I'm Chris Higenyi. Priscilla Regina Naluoga will be at hand in just a few minutes to discuss a strategy for building boards within the country to be able to direct on how exactly such infrastructure must be put up. Do stay with us.